Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on building a municipal safety manual. My name is Adam Brome, and I am an administrative coordinator with SARM. We're going to start off today's webinar with a brief introduction to the Adobe Connect platform. We will then transition into the main presentation, followed by a Q&A session. This webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available on our website on the webinars page following today's session. Just a reminder to maximize your audio and video quality during today's webinar. Please either join through Google Chrome or the Adobe Connect desktop app. And if you're joining us on your mobile device, please make sure to download the app for a better webinar experience. If you'll notice, the chat box is located on the right side of your webinar window and is visible to all webinar participants and facilitators. You can also use this to connect with other attendees, bring any technical difficulties to the speaker's attention for troubleshooting, or to provide any other comments and/or feedback. There is a dedicated question and answer box labeled Q&A, which is located right underneath the chat box. This is where you can submit any questions that you may have regarding the webinar content throughout today's session. Please do not submit any questions through the chat box. If we do run out of time before your question is asked during the Q&A session, our presenters will follow up with you directly offline following the webinar, so don't worry about that. There will also be a copy of today's presentation available for download during the Q&A portion of the session next to the chat box. Please let me know in the chat if you're unable to download the file, and I will email it to you directly. And again, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during today's event, please let us know in the chat box, and we will do our best to troubleshoot. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Rob Curry with the Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy, who will be moderating today's webinar.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Adam. As has already been mentioned, my name is Rob Curry, and I'm quite honored and pleased to be your moderator for today's session. I am an executive in residence at the Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy, and my background has been that I've worked in the public and education sectors over the years, and I look forward to being with you as we learn from Darcy today and share with one another our questions and hear with our respective answers. We will, as part of the agenda, have Darcy share his presentation with us and then open it up for some Q&As towards the end. I'd like to inform you that we have approximately 150 people joining this session virtually, and I thank one and all for taking the time to be with us today. I'd also like to share that as a land acknowledgement, as we are all residing all across this great province, we all reside on treaty land and the traditional homeland of the Métis. And as we work towards reconciliation through our collective work, we seek to reaffirm our relationships and/or our knowledge with one another through education and providing opportunities for everyone to learn. Today's presenter is Darcy Nolte. Darcy started his career working in heavy construction with Ledcor and PCL over 30 years ago, predominantly in the oil and gas sectors, both on tools and in supervisory roles. An opportunity arose to work with an oil and gas producer in various operational and maintenance roles until retiring as the Senior Operations Superintendent in charge of the province of Saskatchewan and southeastern Alberta with a team of 162 people. After retiring, Darcy had an exciting opportunity to begin a new career with Southeast College, a role that has allowed him to be able to share some of what he has learned over his incredible career. Safety has always been a significant part of Darcy's focus, and helping others understand why it is so important to running a successful and cost-effective organization has been a long-standing commitment. And he sincerely hopes that you will gather some knowledge today that will be implemented or can be implemented in your area to make an even more safer, more effective workplace than it is now. And without further ado, I'd like to turn the session over to Darcy. Welcome, Darcy.
I thank you, Rob. That was for those kind words. Thank you, Adam, and thank you to the delegates that have joined us on this call. And on behalf of Southeast College, I thank everybody. As we get into this, if you have questions, again, please put them forward. I'd be more than happy to answer them. And I'll stick around way after this is over if you have questions to answer them as well. So as my brief little bio there says, I've been in the industry for 30 years. We've lost our file there, Adam. Anyways, I don't need it to carry on, but
I'll get it back up there, Darcy. Just 1 second.
I've worked in the industry for over 30 years. I have come to work at the college in an industry coordinator role, which means simply that I work with industries such as yours to assist and guide wherever I'm asked, and to do some training and facilitating. So safety manuals, safety plans, safety policies tend to get overlooked a lot in all industries. We all think we have a hand on it or a handle on it. But the thing is, they are super important. They're very, very important to your organization, whether you're SARM, whether you're a private organization. As we move forward and as time progresses, there's more regulations. OH&S becomes more involved in just about everything that we do, from how we manage our offices, to how we maintain our equipment, to how we train our people, how we handle incidents and investigate accidents. It's all important. So without a written safety plan that documents all of that, an organization doesn't have clear direction. There's no one place you can go to that says, okay, this is what we need to do in a step-by-step sort of policy, right? Typically, in most organizations, you'll have some senior people that know or think they know what they should be doing, and nobody goes into this stuff thinking they're doing the wrong thing. But if you don't know what you don't know, that can get you in trouble. So a policy or a manual that you have that's a tangible piece of literature on your shelf, both in the shop and in the administrator's office, is someplace you can use as a reference. So if you don't have hard and fast policies, if your policies are vague, they're open to interpretation. And interpretation in the regulator's eyes is bad. It needs to be black and white. If they're open to interpretation, can be seen as negligence by the regulator. So if you have an accident, you have a situation that OH&S has to investigate, or any other regulator, it's not just OH&S, it could be WorkSafe, it can be the RCMP, it could be the city police, it could be whoever. If you don't have policies in place, you're going to question why not. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So one of the big things that I hear when I'm out and I'm talking to different organizations such as yourselves is that we don't have money for this. Everybody knows what they're doing. We don't have money. Sorry, we'll just get caught up here. So we don't have money for this. Is never a reason not to have this. So OH&S standards, the 2020 regulations states that all employers have a verifiable and documented safety and training policy in place. And that policy is readily available for an OH&S officer to look at if they show up in your shop or your office. Okay. As the slide says, and in the event of an incident, OH&S has the power to levy fines and recommend jail terms as they see suitable. And lack of funding is not defensible. So if you were to have an issue and they do an investigation and they find out that you don't have a policy because it wasn't in the budget, We couldn't budget for it. That is not a defensible reason. And they will level penalties on all decision makers. So that can be the foreman, the administrator, it can be the council. They don't stop now at just the frontline worker who is usually the foreman. They go up the ladder. They don't go down the ladder. So they'll go up the ladder and they'll investigate. And they will levy fines. And if it's serious enough, they will charge you, not charge you, but they can impose criminal penalties, like jail term penalties. That's rare and never happened in Saskatchewan, fortunately. But they do have the power to do that. Okay. So the other one is, I hear that we have a safety plan. It's somewhere. It's in the administrator's office. It's in the foreman's office. It's in the council chambers. It's somewhere. That's good if you have a plan or a binder or manual. That's great. But does everyone know where it is? And a lot of times, again, when I'm facilitating to different people, they'll say, yeah, well, I don't know where that is, or I don't know what that is. And usually it's the frontline workers that will tell me that. The senior management supervisors typically know where it is, but the frontline workers also need to know where it is. They need to know what's in it. If only the administrator has it, and only the administrator has it in their library, it does no good. It's pointless. It's purposeless, and it's purposeless because it's not available for people to come and look at. It's not easily accessible. So let's say your administrative office is not part of your shop area. Say it's in town and the shop area is out of town, so all the workers are out of the shop area. They don't have access to it. And yes, they can ask for it. And yes, they come and see it maybe, but that's not accessible in the eyes of OHS. Okay, accessible means it has to be within your workplace. You have a municipal safety plan or a binder or policy to keep everybody safe, make everybody aware of potential dangers, make everybody aware of the training requirements, and there's many training requirements that are required. Make everybody aware that you have an incident and accident reporting process and policy, because that is also required under OHS. You have to have some way to report near misses, hazards, and typically that'll be your OHS committee that will probably follow up with that. But it has to be recorded and it has to be documented. It has to be somewhere, and it has to be in a format that everybody understands and can enter into as they need to. Okay. And finally, does everyone have access to it? So everyone is counselors, administrators, foremen, receptionists, workers, your grader operator, your foreman, the guy that runs the zero-turn mower, the guy that runs the hoe. All those people need to have access to it. So it's important when you do these things to have, if you have separate areas, to have 2 copies or 3 copies, whatever is required, right? Depending on how many shops you have, how big of RM you are. Doesn't cost much money to make binders up as you go along. So, okay, again, it's kind of a repeat here of what I just said. It needs to be stored where everybody has access to it. The administrator should be typically the one that controls it, can have the control document. So they can make sure it's updated as needed, but it needs to be available for everyone. So if all stakeholders do not know or are not aware of the document's contents, that's very important. What's in that document? Does it just say work safe, don't get hurt? Or is it more involved? And I've seen some that are stipulate, use common sense, don't get hurt. Or the foreman's got 30 years experience, so we don't need to really document much because the foreman will teach these people. They got 30 years experience, so that's fine. That's not fine, actually. The foreman had 30 years experience. That's great, but let's put that experience down in words. So if the foreman wins the lottery and decides to retire this afternoon, you have some way to hand that off to the next person in line, and some way for your staff to not have to go, what the heck, where's this, or how do I do this, or where do I go for that? It should be there. It should be really simple. It should be easy to just hand off to the next person and without any issue, be able to open it up, read it, and understand your organization's policies. Now, everybody has different policies. Everybody has different practices, but your basic policies and practices will be the same amongst everybody. It's the same amongst all organizations, government, private, it doesn't matter. You're going to have policies about working alone. You're going to have policies about the right to refuse, the right to know. Those kind of things are standard amongst everybody and need to be documented and need to be, when people are onboarded, they need to be discussed. So how often does your document get reviewed if you have one? Is it revised as people or equipment or materials or chemicals are updated? Every time you update a piece of equipment or change chemicals, whatever they may be wash chemicals, you change to a different DEF fluid or different oil, different lubricants, all that needs to be documented in your manual somewhere where people can see it. Now, you can use an SDS type format for that kind of stuff, but equipment, if you go from John Deere to Cat or whatever, it's, yeah, they all work the same sort of, but they're all different. They have different inspection requirements. They have different warranties. They have all that stuff's different. So that has to be updated in your manual. So whoever's going to use that piece of equipment can, look at it. Or if the council wants to look at it, it's right there. Or if an OH&S officer wants to say, okay, let me see your manual, and he sees John Deere this and Volvo that, and he looks out or she looks out and it's Cat, then they're going to start digging deeper into your training and all that stuff. So every time you update a piece of equipment, your training needs to be updated for that piece of equipment, just because they're different, right? So if you do have a current safety plan, everybody knows where it's at. That is fantastic, and that's good. And there's few organizations such as yours that have a current, up-to-date safety plan or safety manual. We call it a safety plan or a manual. It's kind of the words intermix, but it's fantastic. It shows diligence within your organization. It shows that the culture, the safety culture, goes from the top down and the bottom up. And that's what you want in a good organization. And that's how you become effective and cost efficient, is when you have buy-in from everybody. And everybody has to include the elected officials as well, because they control the budgets, right? So again, if you have a safety plan, does everybody know where it's at? Whether it's out of date or up to date, everybody still knows where it's at. And it is up to date with the current regulations. So OH&S updated its regulation. Now, not a whole lot of things changed in 2020, but they did update. So if you don't refer to the latest regulations in your manual, you need to update it to show the current. And about every 5 years, they like to just go through and refresh. I think the last refresh was probably about 10 years in the making. But when they do refresh, you need to refresh your manual. Now, a good rule of thumb, of course, is to review once a year, and that's a big job if you have a full-on safety manual. That can be a big job, and that can take a lot of time for somebody to go through it. So one of the things that I tell our clients to do, if they engage us, is that we do a 3-year, we do a third, and a third, and it makes it easy. And we hand off what isn't our expertise. So administrators would handle their end of it, foreman would handle the equipment, and it just makes the big piece of pie easier to eat. Over 3 years is trying to do it all at once. So make sure it meets the current regulations. Then I also recommend, and it's a good practice, good policy, that you use it as part of your onboarding. So when you hire a new staff, or even as your staff roles may change, you might have a foreman that retires, and you elevate somebody within your ranks to a foreman. Then you can use the manual again to update them and onboard them to that new role. It just gets them all on the same page. You need to review your manual. I've talked about that a lot, and that's the biggest key to all of this, is reviewing the manual every 3 years. That'll keep you current. That'll keep everything the way it should be. And what's really important, folks, is to have something that's auditable. So if OH&S comes and they want to audit your safety manual, it needs to make sense to them, and it needs to make sense to you for your organization. There's no point when you make a manual or you go down a path to go grab something generic off wherever and just fill in the blanks, because half of a generic manual won't match your organization. So it's important to keep that all within in the scope of what you're doing, right? So everybody has monthly safety meetings, right? So do you use the safety plan or the safety manual as part of those safety meetings, or as part of your daily tailgate meetings? Now, I know a lot of people, again, I do some training for your members as far as ground disturbance and things like that. A lot of times I hear, well, we do safety meetings every month, but we don't necessarily do daily tailgate meetings. And it's really, really a good practice to get into, and encourage your membership, encourage your workers to do that. It gets everybody on board with what's happening for the day. If there's new policy or new concerns coming from the office to the workers, then that's a place to bring that up. And it just brings together a sense of team. And if you have a sense of team and you have a good safety culture, you're successful. So without a good policy, I'll tell you this, I'll tell you this from the oil and gas industry, and the same applies to your industry. There's a lot of needless accidents. And accidents, from my previous life in oil and gas, all accidents were considered preventable. All accidents, from animal strikes to pinch fingers to paper cuts, they were all considered preventable. And why were they considered preventable? Because if you do a root cause analysis and go back into the why something happened, okay, I hit a deer. So, okay, I was driving to work and I hit a deer this morning. It wasn't my fault. The deer jumped out of the ditch and right into the front of my truck. Okay, fair enough. And that's what 95% of everybody thinks that I can't control what a deer does. It's rutting season right now and all that. But we know that it's rutting season, so then maybe we need to slow down, and maybe we need to not overdrive our headlights, and maybe we need to just be a little more aware. So part of your safety manual might include a statement about animal strikes, or even putting signage up. I can tell you that I've a number of times I've been driving down gravel roads and come over a hill, and there's road work going on the other side of that hill, and there's no signs up, right, until I get over the hill. So, and when I say a number of times, I'm going to say I've been in Saskatchewan since 2011, when I was transferred here. I'm still here because I really like Saskatchewan. So I don't mean anything disrespectful about this. It's just people sometimes get complacent and they think I'm out on a gravel road and I don't need to put a sign up. So one time I actually skidded through a construction site because it was just over the crest of a hill and there was no indication that there was any work going on the other side. And they were replacing a approach, or removing an approach. I don't know what was going on. But things like that in your safety plan, your safety manual, you identify things like that, like signage has to go up. Here's our policy. Now you can call it a policy, you can call it a code of practice. My previous life, we had a code of practice, a how to change the toner in a photocopier. Now that's, seems really stretching it, right? But because toners are carcinogenic, we had a policy for that. You had to wear gloves. You had to wear a mask if they were the powder type toners. So things like that you put into your safety plan, and it's there forever, right? And then if you change to something different, you remove it, and that's why you review every 3 years. You keep reviewing, and it's evergreen, right? It just keeps it changes as the seasons change, type deal, right? So as things change, as people change, equipment, office equipment, right? So we're nearing the end of what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to tell you what we recommend you include in a auditable safety plan, and I'm going to hit the highlights, and I mean, there's each one of these headings has a number of subsections in them that we build into it. So we'll get started. When I say a number of subsections, each one, it gets to be a huge document. So here's your basic table of contents summary that you need to have in an auditable safety manual. So you need to have your corporate commitments. So that's, things like your mission statement, your org chart, that kind of stuff. Okay. You need to have all your policies. So whatever policies you have need to go in there. Hazard assessment. So how do you deal with the hazard assessment? Now, I've heard people have hazard assessments and other people say they don't have hazard assessments. So hazard assessments are the key to avoiding anything beyond assessing the hazard and identifying a hazard that could be. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Your requirements for personal protective equipment. Okay, what's required? So if you're running a grader, you still need your high vis vest, you need your boots, you need a hard hat for when you get out, you need gloves. But if you're running a zero turn mower, you need to wear safety glasses. Inside the equipment, you need to have a little set of different stuff. So you have to identify that. How do you do incident and accident investigations? What are your safety rules? What's the safety rule? Like, what's required? If you're working in a shop on a grinder, do you have to wear glasses, like safety glasses and a visor? Is that grinder in the right spot, or is it beside the oil storage, which I seen in one shop? in an RM shop, where they had their grinder actually spraying sparks to the containment, the oil drum containment. So I just was there, and nothing ever happened, and they never thought about it, right? So it's not that they were doing that on purpose; it just was there, and nobody thought, hey, that could catch on fire. So, what's your preventative maintenance policy? So, and not just for the equipment, for your vehicles, for your office, for everything that you have, all your tools. You know, do you change grinder blades or grinder stones? Do you are your drills in shape? Are your hand tools proper? Are they welded? Again, I was in a RM shop for something else, and some of the hand tools, the wrenches were welded because they had cracked, so they actually welded the wrench. Well, that weakens, you know, that's bad, and that could snap off and hurt yourself, right? So what's the policies around that? What's your policy around inspections? Your safe work practices. So some people call them safe work practices, some call them codes of practice. So they're the same thing. How do you do something? How do you change a toner? You don't have to write detailed step by step, but it's kind of the abbreviated version of what you're going to do. If you're going to fuel a piece of equipment, what do? You shut the equipment, you cool it down, shut it off, ground, then fuel. When you're done fueling, put the nozzle back, take your ground off, fuel cap back on, and start it up. Simple things like that. That's as quick as it has to be, and it's takes 10 minutes to do. And I always say in wintertime, sometimes when people have a little more free time in wintertime, that's a good time for them to write policy or codes of practice or safe work practices. What is your training requirements and safety meeting requirements? Those have to be actually laid out. OH&S requires that you visit or manually write that down, have that somewhere, and have that policy where everybody can see. What's your emergency response practices? Your procedures for that, and who are your contacts for that? That has to be recorded somewhere. Where do you keep your records and statistics? Now, statistics are boring, and they make you go to sleep. And but they're important for an organization to maintain, because if in the wintertime everybody slips and falls on the doorway coming into the shop because there's ice there and it never gets fixed, well, if the statistics show that happens quite frequently, maybe that's a great driver to say, we got to fix that. Move the door, put a roof over that area, whatever, right? So that's why you keep records and stats. Then you have to have your legislated references, so your OH&S references. Then you have an appendix, okay? Your procedures and job hazard analysis or hazard analysis. We call them JHAs, but there's a number of things you call. And then your acknowledgement page, and your acknowledgement page is simply, this is version 1, this is version 2, who signed off on it, and that's kept at the back of the binder. So every time you revise it, it's documented, and what was documented. Okay, so that's really in a abbreviated form what needs to be in a manual. And then this, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this is something that was developed for SARM. Thank you. Can you I can't double click on that, Adam. Can you, and make that, open that up? Or no? Anyways, okay, apparently not. So this is a drop down, and this is just an example, folks. This has all the basic training requirements for administrators, office staff, and field staff. Okay, and what this happens is drop down, you can enter their name, person's name, the date the training was done, and then as time progresses, if they're coming due for training, it's going to turn yellow. That's going to be they need training refreshed within 90 days. And red is going to be like you have to get it done right away, otherwise your tickets are going to expire. So just about all RMs, field staff require ground disturbance and confined space and first aid CPR. So those are kind of the three basics. And then from there, you know, WMIS doesn't expire, TDG doesn't expire, but the ones that expire, PME doesn't expire unless you change your equipment, and then you probably want to do PME on that piece of equipment. So that might be a refresh on that just for everybody. So that's what this does. This was created in conjunction with SARM. So this is downloadable to all of you already. Okay, so it's a great tool to use. And there's no thinking involved. You just enter a name, enter the date they were trained, and it tracks it for you. Okay, so how can we assist you? So this is what we can do to help you. If you have the time and resources to commit to if you don't have a manual, you want to commit to building this, that's great, and we will encourage that you do that. But if you don't, we at the college, this is my expertise, and there's one other person here, it's his expertise as well. We can assist you in building this manual. So if you're interested in that, it's a cost-effective quote. We don't oversell, we don't undersell, but we do come and visit your site, and we go away from there and give you a quote. And depending on the size of your site and how many pieces of equipment and people and stuff, so all prices are slightly different, of course, because it's more or less work as required. So we're here if you're interested, and the manual itself is SARM has that, so kind of the outline of the manual. But this does take a lot of time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like to do a proper audited manual, it's going to take. It's not a couple-day project. It's a couple-week project to do a proper one. So, and then if OH&S comes and audits you, that you're going to have everything in place, and they're going to say thank you very much, and you're going to walk away. So one of the biggest things that OH&S audits for is training, right? So training is a big thing, and there's lots of times we get panic calls that OH&S just here, and we have 30 days to get all our staff trained in whatever, how to use a stapler, for instance. Well, that's an exaggeration, but so you don't want to get into those positions, because then it's panic. You can't plan for it. That costs you money. Every time you can't plan for something, it costs your organization money, whether it's time or whether it's actual cash, or in some cases penalties. So I would recommend that you consider this. Like I say, you can build your own, and we're very happy that you can do that. But if you don't have the resources, we're more than happy to help. So that's it. If you're interested in us assisting you or guiding you, there's our number. Please feel free to call it. It'll be part of the slide presentation you're going to download anyways, so we can discuss that.
Darcy, thank you very much. Darcy, thank you very much. And I'd now like to move into our Q&A component. And I have received a few, and I'm just going to read them out, as well as offer a few in any particular order. So the first one I'd just like to ask, is a virtual document acceptable if it's on the cloud?
As long as you have a physical copy for the auditor to look at and take with them. So your virtual document, I guess the context of that, is it for the auditor or is it for staff? If it's for staff, yes, as long as they all have smartphones that can access it. If it's for the auditor, you do need to have a paper copy somewhere.
Thank you. So my next question would be, are RMs required by law to have a safety manual?
RMs are not excluded from any OH&S rules. So
Okay.
there's no exclusion clause from OH&S that says municipal governments are excluded from any of their rules. So the answer to that is RMs are bound by the laws of the province, and OH&S dictates those laws.
Thank you. I have another question here. There was a person that was informed that they would have to get new training if they went to a different company, such as Wemyss. Is that in fact your understanding, that you need new training if you go to a different company?
So Wemyss is good forever as long as you don't leave the company you took the training with. When you leave that organization, even if you go from one RM to another RM, you're required to redo your Wemyss. Now, Wemyss is relatively easy. You can do it online. It takes a couple hours and it's done online.
Okay. You may have already referenced this a little bit earlier, but I'll just ask it for clarification. If you have less than 10 employees, do you require an OH&S committee?
So the answer is no. But the right answer is you should have a couple people that look after it, because it doesn't take a lot of time. It can be an office person and a worker, like the foreman or one of the operators. It's just to gather all those little bits of things that get piled up over a quarter. Like a committee should meet every quarter. So if the right answer is you should have one, no matter whatever the size of your organization. But the legal answer is if you're under 10, you don't require one by law.
We're always looking for the safety and well-being of our people. So I hear you on that one. I have a question here that was shared during your presentation, Darcy. And the question was, is there a place, and maybe Adam can help us with this one as well, is there a place where that spreadsheet that was shown as the presentation here it can be found or downloaded? So we're just wondering if there's a place that downloadable spreadsheet could be located or shared.
That will be shared through SARM, the organization SARM. Not on this presentation, but it is accessible through SARM proper.
Okay.
So we'll make sure to send out a separate email following the session today.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
Thank you. So these are questions that have, again, been shared here. So some of it will be reinforcement and some of it might be new information. But the question posed was, are RMs required to pay for their staff to acquire training?
Well, the answer is no. But I would argue that if the RM itself or the organization itself isn't willing to facilitate training for their staff, there's a deeper rooted issue there, and would need to be. I think that should be rethought. Staff, that's part of onboarding the staff, right? Like if you get, so for instance, if I hire somebody and I say they have to have ground disturbance, which is mandatory if you're digging a hole in the ground, and they have to have confined space, which is mandatory if they're going in that hole in the ground. Uh, and I tell them you have to have this, but you have to pay for it yourself and do it on your own time. I'm kind of setting them up for failure, and I'm probably not retaining my staff like I should, because they're either gonna feel pushed into a corner, or they're gonna feel like the next best job that comes along they're gonna jump to. Okay, so it's entirely up to the organization, but there's no requirement that they pay, but this pretty much the standard out there in most organizations is that they pay for their staff's training, both in time and like time allowed to go and financially. But there's no rule that says you have to.
Okay. Darcy, we've got some great questions coming in, continuing to come in here now. So the one question, are council members considered employees as part of the 10-member stipulation for an ONH committee?
Well, that's a good question. And I don't honestly know the answer to that, but I would say, and that would require some further digging. So my gut feeling is no, they're not council.
So here's the second part. I think this is a really good segue, a link to it. Should the RM Council or REEV be part of the OH&S committee?
There should be representation from council or the REEV on that OH&S committee. They can be part of the management representation. But remember that the OH&S committee is for workers. So if you heavily weight it on with council members, it can be seen as maybe leaning the. It's not appropriate to heavily weight with management. You should have out of a 10-member committee, you should maybe have 2. You know, you could have the administrator and a counselor or the REEV as part of it.
Yeah.
Maybe 3. So I wouldn't exceed 30% of your OH&S committee with upper management or council.
Thanks.
That's just a good practice.
Yeah. So Darcy, there's a question here on oil storage. With regards to oil storage inside, how do we find out what the allowable amount is? This individual has had a bit of a challenge trying to find that. So oil storage inside, how do we find out what the allowable amount is?
Well, you can store any amount of oil inside that you want, but it has to be in a containment, and that containment has to hold 1.5 times the volume of whatever you're storing. So if it's a barrel of oil, you have to be that containment. So it has to be a containment that either plastic or metal that's impermeable, so it can't leak onto the floor or the ground or whatever, has to hold 1.5. So if you have 10 barrels, it has to be able to hold 15 barrels. And that seems wrong when it's inside, but that's the rules. And the same as outside. And it has to be 1.5 times. And that accounts for rainwater. So if you have containment around fuel pumps, for instance, rainwater is considered not rainwater when it's in the containment. It's considered part of what's in there, part of what's leaked out. So, and you can't just dump that rainwater, you have to suck it out, dispose of it properly.
Thank you. Um, I think you've alluded to this. You've actually directed some numerous comments to it, but maybe just to re-emphasize the point. Um, if an RM employee is hurt on the job and the RM does not have a safety manual in place, the RM leaves itself open to
issues.
right.
Okay. If
Yes.
you if an employee gets hurt, I'm going to tell you guys a real life story. A friend of mine that was involved in this, and this, you're all going to shake your heads, but this is a true story. So my friend and I grew up together. He became the foreman for a for not an RM, but a county in the province of Alberta. He was the foreman, and in their employ, they had a guy that was a relative of an elected official that was hired. Okay, so this fellow felt he was beyond reproach. He could do whatever he wanted. Nobody's going to say anything because like he was related, and so right or wrong, which that's the wrong attitude to have. Anyways, he was an accident waiting to happen, and when they were in the shop, you know, in the wintertime, this happened in the wintertime. They were building, I don't know what they were building, but they were building it out of plywood. And the guy had a skill saw and was cutting the wood, and there was a new hire there. And this guy was actually holding up the saw, going sing, sing, sing to the guy that was working beside him. And the new hire put up his hand like this because he thought the guy was actually good. And the guy cut off 3 of his fingers. Okay. So it was an accident, but it wasn't an accident. So what happened was OH&S come, and because that's a serious thing. They did an investigation and they found out, well, this guy had been doing stupid stuff like that for a long time. My friend, the foreman, hadn't reprimanded him because they were sort of friends and he didn't want to make waves because he was related to one of the elected officials. And they had no policy in place for use of tools. So what ended up happening was, of course, the guy that cut the guy's 3 fingers off was fired immediately. My friend was fired. The county was charged, and so penalized by OH&S and WCB. And the fellow that got his 3 fingers cut off was awarded a bucket load of money. So when they did a deeper rooted investigation, they found that one of the elected officials was steering the day-to-day work, day-to-day things that were going on in the shop. So that person was also charged and levied a fine. Okay, which meant that person was no longer, he wasn't reelected. So when the election come up, so it's very important to remember that everybody's accountable. From it used to be the old adage like everything ran downhill, and it doesn't anymore. It actually goes uphill. So if there's an accident, they start to look at the top, and they'll go to the next level up and the next level up and the next level up. Nope. So yeah, just be aware of that, everybody that's out there. I see a comment in here that the elected officials are elected to govern and create policy. That's true. But if you want to have somebody, one of them on the OH&S committee, I think that might have been pointed at. That's fine. Doesn't hurt to have other eyes, but you're right. The workers and the actual paid staff are the ones that should be on there on the OH&S committee.
So Darcy, as well on a, available resources thinking, if an RM wants to tailor the template manual for their RM, is the Southeast College available to assist with that?
Yes, we are. Now, we are, and this is where it gets it for a fee. Okay, we've provided the outline to SARM for all its members,
Right.
but we are available. There's two of us here at the college that are available to come out, but we do that on a contract basis.
Thank you. And is there a place where an RM can send its staff for training, or places?
For this,
Yes.
not really. Like, we can come and train, but really the training process then becomes building the manual. So it becomes a contractual thing again.
Okay. Okay. Here, a question just popped up here. If you were hired as a safety advisor, and there are currently items missing within the safety manual, what liability is on the safety advisor during the creation of such a safety manual and procedures and that? So if you're new to the job and you've just come in and there are items missing in your safety manual, what responsibilities do you have as a safety advisor?
Well, if you're new to the position and you've recognized that there's deficiencies in the safety manual, then as long as you're showing diligence and showing progress on that, your liabilities really taper off.
Okay.
Okay. So, but if you're new to the position, and so you're only new to the position for a short time, okay, in the eyes of the law, you're new for a very short time. You can't, like, 2 years from now, you can't say, well, I'm new to the position and I'm still working on it. Okay.
Okay.
Like, when I say a short time, it's months, not years.
Right. Thank you. Another question here. If you have a recommendation on who, this goes back to composition of the OH&S committee.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a recommendation on who should be on the OH and Occupational Health and Commission? You know what I mean? If during the winter you have only admin, municipal foreman, and a construction foreman on staff, if we need to be heavily weighted in employees, as we should be, and we don't really have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's a tough one, right? Because I know it's seasonal work for those folks. So as a minimum, you need to have the foreman on there, even though they're management in some way. But the foreman will be fine, the administrator, and you can ramp that committee up when you bring your staff back for the 6 months that they're there. Right? You can add them for those 6 months.
Right.
I know it's hard.
Darcy,
It's hard.
Darcy, I have, and in view of our time, I have one more question I'd like to pose,
Okay.
and it's based on the support from the Southeast College. So,
Yes.
is there an option for a couple of municipalities to get together to work under a single contract with the Southeast College, or are they viewed as separate entities?
It's not advisable, and I'm not saying that because it's more money for the college. That's not why I'm saying this. It's not advisable because you're separate organizations. So taking one and just changing the name at the top of it isn't ever advisable. Like, can it happen? Yes. Is it? Are you going to get a product that's suited for your organization only? Not 100%.
Right.
I just want to explain something, and I know we're out of time here. So I want to tell you that, like, a safety manual seems like seems like it might be onerous and expensive at the beginning. Lose in my example there, have one accident where it was avoidable, and that cost that county $700,000 by the time they were done. So a safety manual isn't even going to cost 10% of that. Like it's a safety manual is like a drop in the bucket compared to one accident. You have one accident where you have a guy off for 5 months or 6 months or avoidable because of training, just in time lost and salary lost while you replace that person more than covers a safety manual. Once you have it, it's the initial outlay. I get it, but the initial outlay is insignificant if you spread it out over the life of the RM. Like it's pennies, right? So.
And I think I heard you earlier mentioning in terms of your manual, you look over a 3-year period and take parts of it every year to revise and upgrade or add to as one sees fit.
Yeah. So revisions review take very little time and can be done by the foreman in the winter time, right? Along with the administrator. You sit down for a day to review a third of the manual. That's all it takes is a day. Probably not even. Go through, if nothing's changed, you just mark that down as reviewed, and no revisions that you made. They both sign off and it's good. You do a third, and a third. So it's a day's commitment once it's built. And if you do have a wholesale change in equipment and stuff, it might be 3 or 4 days, or you have some policies that you want to add in. Well, it might be, but if the foremen are it's slower times for them in winter sometimes. And if it's a year like this year where they're not plowing snow and stuff, there's lots of time right now to do that. You just have to schedule. If it's scheduled, it'll happen. If you don't schedule it, it won't happen. But the facts are, if you have one and you follow what you say you're going to do, you become more efficient, you become more cost effective, and you build a safety culture instead of oh yeah, well, the RM of XYZ says I have to do this, to the RM of XYZ cares about me, and I really want to do the best I can. I'm not just there for, the paycheck. I'm there because I want to be, and I'm there because they care for me, and that's what you want. And I know that's a new way of thinking for some organizations, but that's how you get the most effective use out of your employees. And that's really what it's all about. We want everybody to be firing on all cylinders, as they say.
So my final question from our participants here: are all people, when they attend a work site, bound to follow the OH&S regulations?
So that's kind of a loaded question. If a counselor shows up on a work site, yes. Whoever shows up on that work site, if they're part of that municipality, are required to follow the regulations. So that's hard hats, work boots, all that stuff. They can't show up and start directing. It's like a counselor cannot show up legally and start directing workflow of staff. Okay, that's wrong, and that's unsafe. So if they show up, they have to be ready to put their hard hat on and safety boots and follow the rules of the law.
Darcy, you're quite insightful. I think you read through the lines of that question there. So I thank you very much for that direct response.
All right.
In light of our time, everyone, I want to thank, on behalf of all of our attendees, I want to thank Darcy for your insights, your comments, and sharing specific examples that have very much been a part of your work experience and you're bringing forward to help others learn and prepare for safety moving forward. So I want to thank you on behalf of everybody here. And you're available, as I heard, on offline a little bit later, or maybe if others have questions, and they can go to you directly out at the Southeast College. And I want to thank each and every one for attending this 2021 SARM midterm convention on Municipal Safety Manual. And before I log off, Darcy, if it's okay with you, I'd like to turn the mic back your way, and any final comments you'd like to offer.
No, I guess, yes. First of all, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Adam, and thank you to all the delegates that joined us on this call today. I hope I've been a bit insightful for you and a bit helpful. Please, whether you use a college or not, I encourage you all to do the right thing and do it safe, and keep your workers safe and keep yourself safe, and have a fantastic holiday season. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, one and all. And I can see from the comments here, there are many thank yous to you, to Darcy. So have an enjoyable day, everyone. A safe, enjoyable day. Take care.
Thank you.